Well, Maddie, of course you do. I muted. I muted myself accidentally, and now I unmuted. Okay, so we're gonna start over. I'm happy the stream just started though. It's only been going on for a few seconds, so nothing I said is I'm gonna have to really repeat too much. So the topic, because we had so many salty people in our games yesterday, we had little salty boys. Um, was checking all my tabs to make sure. Yeah, no, it was on my end. Um, Pretty much, the topic I'm going over for the pre-stream today is it toxic? And what exactly is toxic behavior? I just realized that's reversed on my title. One more correction there. There we go. Oh, and my chat is getting bugged. Can someone type something real quick? Could be anything in chat. I want to make sure it's not bugged. Because the same thing that happened last time happened this time, where it kind of glitched out the last message, which last time that happened, it didn't update with any new messages. Anything. Perfect. Okay. Okay, good. It's still updating. That's good. So after all the saltiness we had in yesterday's stream, I kind of wanted to go over, and by the way, this is my opinion, and it's my opinion. I'm going to state why I have my opinion on what is toxic and what is not toxic. So the things that people say, we'll start with Survivor side, of what people think is toxic gameplay as a Survivor. So as a Survivor, people think clicking flashlights and teabagging is toxic behavior. I think, in my opinion, depending on the context of the situation, it can be. And what do I mean by that? If you get a successful loop through a window, and the killer swings and hits the window, and you take 0 damage, and you teabag, I think that is a strategy you're using in the game to keep the killer on you and chase. I think that is not toxic behavior. I think you're using an element. Basically, you're using something as gameplay. I consider that gameplay. You're agitating the killer. It's kind of taking a social element of the game. I think if all the living survivors are at the exit gate and are teabagging, and clicking their flashlights, I think in that context, that is considered toxic behavior. Where I think at that point, you can't justify it as being non-toxic. I'm not saying having toxic behavior is bad. I'm just saying don't be going around and be like, oh, I'm not toxic. I don't do things like that. If you teabag at exit gates when the match is over and everyone's going to escape, that's toxic behavior. Now, if you're the only person at an exit gate, the killer is there, and your teammates are still in the level or trying to open up another exit gate, I think teabagging in that moment and clicking your flashlight is perfectly fine, because you're trying to keep the killer there as long as possible to give your teammates the best opportunity to get out of this situation. Now, saying that, I'm going to move on to killers. So with killers, the most popular toxic behavior is hitting people on hooks, and I would say shaking their head at a survivor after they down a survivor. I think hitting people on hooks is fine, in the same way that when a survivor teabags after getting a successful vault, I think is fine, because all you're doing is you're riling up the person. You're getting them there. Now, hitting them on hooks and they're the last person hooked, that might be considered a little toxic. I think when the game is over and then you're doing behavior that is shitting on the person that you just beat in the game or something like that, I think is toxic. So those are toxic behaviors. I think that we can clearly list as toxic and not toxic depending on the context. So overall, is it possible that it's going to help you win the game? Then I think it's not toxic. Is it possible that it's just something you're doing as bad manners after the game is already over? Then it is toxic. Um, Now, there's certain things that people might consider toxic strategies, which we're going to go back on the survivor side. People consider gen rushing a toxic strategy. What is gen rushing? Is people coming into the game with builds optimally that are going to get gens done as fast as possible. I don't see that more as toxic behavior. I might see that more as a flaw in the gameplay design of Dead by Daylight. You can play a killer with gen slowdown, with perks that are slowing down the game, which would counteract their gen rushing builds. But at the same time, maybe you don't bring a build that's with gen slowdown and they bring a build that's going to speed up the game. Well, now you're in a really tough situation as killer. I think that's more of just the gameplay issue, where, hey, you brought something, you brought paper, and they brought scissors. And their scissors is obviously going to put them in a clear advantage in this match. So gen rushing, where everyone's actively working on gens and trying to get gens done as fast as possible, I don't think that's really a toxic strategy. I think the killer has to play around that. If more people did gen rushing strats, more killers would bring anti-gen rushing builds. I think that's just part of game flow. I don't think that's toxic. Now, on the killer side, people say things like camping and tunneling are toxic. With the way I see game playing, after yesterday's pre-stream video that I released, you'll see it up on YouTube, I think on the 13th. Yeah, I agree with you, William. I think the difference in strategies where a lot of people will complain and say it's toxic, and I think it's just because they have that bad situation of where the killer went into the game with a certain strategy in mind, and the survivors had a better strategy to counter the killer's strategy. Yeah, that is literally it. So you got it on the nose there. It's more of they have a strategy, and the other person brought a better strategy that counters your strategy. No one knew this beforehand. They didn't know who the killer was. They didn't know who they were playing against, the survivors. So it's kind of more just like, it happens. If you're playing Magic the Gathering or you're playing a card-based game, you're going to encounter that, where you're going to have a deck you go against randomly, maybe in a tournament or something like that. That is the complete counter to your deck, and that's just how games are. That's how these things play out. Not saying the game is over, by the way, is that I think perks and stuff like that can help a game significantly, but I think if you go into a game and the survivors counter your strategy completely, I don't think the game's over. I think you can play smart and probably try and get as much as you can out of the match, get as many kills as you can. Maybe you're not going to get a 4K or a 3K, but you know what? You might be able to scrape together some kills before the match is over. You know, that this game is not... The game is very vague on what a win condition is. So, somebody who maybe could just do whatever the best they can, get as many hooks or chases or points as they can, that might be a win to them. So I think most people, even if they get countered, it's still not toxic. I just think they shouldn't count themselves out or give up or DC. That's the last point I'm going to be going on today, is DCing. Now, back to our point. On the killer side, the two things that people are very much called toxic is camping and tunneling. I get, in my opinion, I'm going to start it out with, I don't think they're toxic. I think that there may be very unfun game mechanics, and I think they might make the game unfun for multiple people, the killer and survivors included. But I think as the game's progressing with updates and everything like that, I think they're being smart and they're moving to get rid of tunneling and they're get rid of camping. And I think the reason why it's 100% not toxic is that if you're in a game where you're constantly getting tunneled, or it's a strategy that's constantly go over, they have tools in the game, they have perks in the game that can completely counter tunneling and camping and everything like that. And if you're not bringing these tools in there, that means you're not coming into it prepared. And I get you might have to get rid of your prove thyself. You might have to get rid of your additional healing perk. You might have to, you can't run self-care or maybe Circle of Healing. Maybe you need to run Off the Record or Borrow Time or something like that. Like, there are perks you can run. Maybe you have to switch it out if you're having that bad of a time with camping and tunneling. I don't think those are toxic behaviors, and I think the community considers, by the way, I think there's different levels of camping and tunneling. And I think the community they come up with their own definition, each individual, of what camping and tunneling actually is. In one of our previous games, I know you guys can't hear Daisy's voice in the stream, but Daisy was saying that the killer was camping the person on the hook. The killer had probably been like 30 meters away from the hook and going around and looking for people and trying to find people. Yes, they were kind of, you might call it proxy camping or whatever random term you're going to come up with, but the killer wasn't camping. They were looking around trying to find other survivors. And, like, that's not camping, but Daisy, in her mind, came up with her own definition. And I'm shitting on Daisy. Daisy's allowed to have her own definition because this is everybody in the community is like this. They came up with their own definition of what tunneling and camping is, and tunneling and camping is automatically bad. So, by accusing this person of camping, who is not really camping, it's kind of just, it feels like it's BM to call them campers or tunnelers. One of the things people might do if we're going on the tunneling side of it, so we went over an example of someone being accused of camping when they're not really camping. On tunneling, is all gens are done. You have someone hooked in basement. This was also in yesterday's stream. You have somebody hooked in basement. What is the killer supposed to do? Is the killer supposed to leave basement and go and find the 2 exit gates that are spread out across the map and protect both of them? Or is the killer going to hang out by the one secured kill he has? Well, if I'm the killer, the smart play is to stay with the person in basement and see what happens. Now, for survivors, they can do a really dumb play, a really dumb risky play, and go for the save, and it'll be fun, it'll be heroic. Or they can leave, giving the killer only 1 kill. So people would probably say, hey, that killer was camping, or that killer is trying to get this person out of the game because they're trying to secure their kill. But what else are they supposed to do? That's the strategy. That's what they need to do to get this kill. If they let this person off, then everyone's going to escape and the killer gets nothing at the end of it. The killer's objective is trying to win. They're not here to babysit the survivors or do anything along the lines of how can I make this situation way more in the survivor's favor. For the tunneling aspect, now I know I said I was going to do tunneling, now I'm going to do tunneling. Say there's like 2 gens left. You have 2 hooks on one person and no hooks on anybody else. The game is going by really fast. You see that person that you have 2 hooks on. They split off of somebody else. Now, the survivors say that you should maybe, you know what, chase the person with no hooks. You know, the game's almost over. Chase the person with no hooks. Ignore the person with 2 hooks. That's not the correct strategy. The correct strategy is you need to get a survivor out of the game so you can slow down their gen progress. The game's going by fast. You're going to lose. The strat is, if you are trying to play the game, and try to play the game in a way that you have a chance of getting kills or wins, sometimes you have to eliminate that person with 2 hooks, even if nobody else in the match has hooks. And people are going to say, no, that's tunneling. And it's like, well, yes, if you want to call it tunneling, it might be. But is it toxic? I don't think so. Because somebody now has to sit on the exit game and spectate. That's just how the game's built. So I wanted to go on my little rant, and I see people messaging in the chat. I'm going to go over their messages real quick. I think in general, KAR97 _ Gyoza. I think in general, no matter what what someone says outside a moment is toxic. That anything that feels unfair in the moment will be said to be toxic. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I would say in yesterday's stream, a perfect moment is when me and Daisy were kind of shitting on the killer for being a camper. And camping the basement. One of the situations I mentioned earlier where it was just like the killer got 2 kills because he camped someone in the basement at endgame. Um, to be honest, after the killer even said he was new because he was using his chainsaw. He was playing Hillbilly. He was using a chainsaw constantly in that game. And the only reason why he got kills because he's very new with the chainsaw and he didn't really know what he was doing with the chainsaw. And the only reason he got 2 kills was because he camped the basement. Because people on Survivor side did really bad plays and did really bad strategy, and we had an idiot Jeff that was running no mither, which means he's always injured, so he's always insta-downable. And kinda just fucked us over that game. And I think that's a perfect example of where me and Daisy kind of went on him a little bit. But then after he was like, yeah, I'm new with the killer. I'm not really there. And that immediately diffused the situation where I'm like, this guy's not toxic. I don't even know why I was thinking he was toxic. So now Boa says, an issue people bring up is perks are behind a paywall. You either need a large amount of hours to pick up the perks or spend money on them. I'm like 50-50 on that response there. Because what you're saying 100% is the truth. It's not the player's fault at the end of the day. That would be more of like a gameplay issue or a video game issue. But I'm trying to think of other games that might have DLC or might have... It makes me think of like old school League of Legends. Where when you were playing the game, you were like slowly unlocking and buying runes for your rune page because it wasn't all available at the beginning. And back in the day, that kind of was unfair that someone could have a full decked out rune page and the other person could be going in with nothing, and it's all because of how much time they spent in the game and how many points they accrued to get those runes. Which doesn't exist anymore, and I get why League of Legends moved out of that because they want to make the game more competitive. But the question is that fair? I don't think Dead by Daylight is necessarily a pay-to-win game. But I do think that Dead by Daylight suffers by the fact that you have to buy all this DLC that exists in order to get some content in the game. I think inherently, based on what Bo is saying, is kind of true. Is if I were to go... So, we kind of have this in our group. So, I buy every single DLC. I've owned every single DLC. I own everything when it comes to Dead by Daylight. And it's just one of those things of, like, I don't go through this. So, I normally wouldn't think about this. But, if I think about somebody who we're going to probably play with on stream, Chris... he's somebody who's very new to the game. He probably only has like a few survivors, a few killers. He has very little killers, very little survivors. And he's limited to a perk pool that does have key essential perks, but he's limited to a perk pool where he doesn't have all the variances that I would say that a lot of the other survivors and killers maybe bring to the game. So, yeah, I kind of, like I said before, 50-50 agree with Boa. I agree in the sense that by not spending money or having things, it kind of feels a little bit pay to win. But at the same time, I think the core elements that they give you, the core survivors that they give you kind of roughly enough builds to kind of have variety in your build. So I think when you think of Dwight, Meg, Claudette, and David, and Jake, all these survivors kind of have a little bit of everything. Like, Claudette brings healing. Jake brings sabotage, hook sabotage, sneaking around when he has, like, calm spirit. David brings perks like Dead Hard. And, if you're playing... Oh, Bill is another free one that you get. Bill, you get Unbreakable and Borrow Time. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if that's true. Because, like I'm saying before, all the basic survivors give you the basic builds that would counter other builds. So, you have Dwight, where you could do gen rushing. You have characters like Bill to prevent slugging. And basically Bill also prevents camping. So I think even with the basic survivors, you have enough. That's why I said I'm like 50-50 on what you said there. I agree with that by having these things behind a thing that it's technically pay to win because you have these other variety, but at the same time, I think the base game gives you enough that you can build something with the perks that are there. So that's why it's like, yes, I agree with you because there is probably very unique situations that could come across. And by the way, I'm saying this also on the killer side. I think this might be more dangerous on the killer side because I think the killer might have less tools than the survivor side when it comes to the base game. Because I'm trying to think of like what killer perks are out there that maybe Chris going to be able to counter certain survivor builds like can't with Trapper. Because I think I'm trying to think what the base killers are. I think you only get like Trapper, Hillbilly, Nurse, Huntress. I'm trying to think what the base kit killers are. Let's take a look. My assumption, because it's either the base kit killers are either these 5, or it might just be these 3. But based on what you get here, I mean, to be honest, I don't think the killer perks, I don't think the killer has really, like we mentioned gen rushing before, I don't think any of these killers have really anti-gen rushing perks. I think the Tinker, maybe? Well, no, that's what I'm saying, I agree. I'm thinking the killers really don't have that much variety. Like survivors, like if you look at this, oh, you know what? I just realized I'm bringing up the. You can't even see my screen. But if you look at the survivors, I'm not gonna change the camera. You're gonna see ducks. But if you look at so killers kind of don't have that variety that you feel like you can really combine something to come up with really like anti-gen rushing, anti-heal builds. Like they have like one perk that might help with that, but they don't really have enough perks to set a full build. While on like survivors, like if you look at Dwight, most of his perks are like, okay, he's the generator guy. You look at Meg, she has like sprint burst, quick and quiet, so she's like kind of sneaky. She has a sprint burst, and then she has adrenaline. So when all gens are, everything's done, if she is slugged, she can use that to get back up. You look at Claudette, she has self care, which I know it's been destroyed, but then she has empathy and botany knowledge, which are really good healing perks. Like she can see other people that are injured and heal them. Jake, Iron Will. So Jake has sneaky perks and he has the ability to sabotage. Calm Spirit. Like we look at Nia. Wait, is Nia a base kit? She might be balanced. I don't know who's base kit for survivors. For killers, I have a guess. For survivors, it could be anything. I think Bill's free. I hope Bill's not just free on Steam. Balanced Landing, Streetwise, Urban Invasion, that's not really that helpful. I mean, Balanced Landing's okay. But, like, and then we have Bill. We have, like, Borrow Time, Unbreakable. Those are perks you can bring in. Do anti-camping build, anti-slugging. Dead Hard, and, of course, the best perk ever, No Mither. Like, who... That's your anti-slugging build right there. You just run No Mither. That was me memeing. That did never run No Mither. If you run No Mither, you want your team to lose, or you're doing a challenge. Well, actually, both. It's probably both. You're doing a challenge, which means you want your team to lose. But yeah, survivors seem to be way more kitted out versus the base kit killers. The base kit killers, it doesn't really seem like you get anything. So yeah, I kind of more agree with what you're saying, but it's probably more on the killer side that I feel like you might be unequipped to go against some of these crazy survivor builds. Even if the enemy's running base kit survivor, I think they're in a better situation. But yeah, and going back to the main point, which was toxicity, is that at the end of the day, I think most people that are claiming things are toxic are just salty at the situation, and they didn't like that they lost, so they need to come up with an excuse of why they lost. It is the classic competitive gameplay thing of I can't be bad at the game, so I have to come up with the reason I lost. So let's start with, okay, let's compare this to maybe League of Legends. Oh, I lost because mid got fed. And it's like, maybe, but maybe you lost because you also lost your lane too. Maybe mid got fed, but maybe if you tried harder in your lane, maybe you would have counteracted that mid. Or maybe I lost because jungle never ganked my lane. Maybe you should play well enough in your lane that you don't need a jungler constantly ganking my lane. And then you might be like, oh, but the enemy jungler ganked my lane constantly. And it's like, well, did you place wards in the river? Did you try and counteract getting ganked? Did you try at all? Maybe preventing that? Or did you just allow the jungler to get kills on you over and over again? Yeah, like it's the constant just that is the competitive game strife where most people who play competitive games, which Dead by Daylight I don't feel like is that much of a competitive game, but it's most people who play these multiplayer versus games have to come up with an excuse of why they lost, and it can't be them. They have to pick somebody else or something else that caused them to lose. So they're either gonna blame the game or they're gonna blame what the other player did, and they're gonna call it toxic at the end of the day. Which basically toxic is whatever they decided what it was at the time. But with that, I just needed a topic, and I was like, because of all the salty boys yesterday that just kind of got destroyed and were playing poorly, and the reason why they lost. Spawn peeking is toxic. Well, okay, so you know what actually is toxic, Maddie? So yesterday with Siege, someone was running a hack where all they do is look up at the sky and fire their gun, and then the bullets rain down from the sky and destroy everybody in the house instantly. And that was very unpleasant. That was toxic. Because people who hack in video games are probably toxic. And the reason why I say they're toxic is because if you're hacking in a video game, you're probably not having fun in the same way that other people are having fun, where they're like, I tried something, I tried something, and I wanted to see if this strategy worked, and it came out, and I used the core gameplay. Like, I used the core game to come up with a strat and do it. The people who are probably buying hacks or hacking the game themselves or doing something like that, those people are toxic because the only reason they're probably doing it is to make the other person have a bad time. And the only fun that they're having is that they know that the other people are not having a good time. Wait, there was a popular one before everyone dropped every mode but bomb, where instant transmission to the hostage and then back to the exit. Like, why? How is that fun? And the only reason that's fun is because they know that whoever they're playing against has to go back and sit in queue times after all this, and that they lost that match and they just wasted their time. The problem is the person doing the hack also wasted their time too, because they're eventually, because I mean, I know Siege is better at it, they're eventually just going to get banned. They're eventually going to get banned, and then, you know, there goes their account, and Siege is not a free game. So they're going to have to buy another copy of Siege. To be honest, I think that's what happened to Nakana's account, by the way. So, like, the more I thought about Nakana's old account, I think someone hacked his account and probably got into it and probably used it to cheat in a video game, which caused his account to get deleted. Which is the reason why I think he got fucked over and had to buy a new game. Or had to use a new copy of the game. Which I think is kind of fucked up. That, like, yes, that's possible. I know I have that happen to me before with my League account. Where some people in Russia hacked my account, were playing on Russian servers, and got my whole Riot account to be a Russian account. And I actually had to contact Riot because I couldn't play in North America because the account was thought to be Russian. And so I had to get them to give me my account back. But enough about that. We're going to start the stream. I'm going to close out on the Ducks. Goodbye, Ducks. Hang in there.